morning and welcome to WNHH's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. John Velleca makes New Haven tick. John is a retired New Haven Assistant Police Chief. He's the current Sergeant at Arms at the State Senate, and he is WNHH FM's resident criminal justice expert. Big fancy title. All right. He's here today along with Station Manager Harry Droz, the bravest man in New Haven, because he loves Donald Trump, to help us run down some of the latest criminal justice stories in our community and our world. Welcome back to the studio, John.
Great to be back, as usual.
All right, I got a little role-playing exercise for you and Harry Droz.
Okay.
Okay, and this involves, John, your experience interacting with the FBI and dealing with threats.
Okay.
You run a city, and some hackers have shut down all your computer systems, put them on lock. You cannot pay bills. You cannot find out who owes you what. You cannot even communicate with each other. You can't access 100 years worth of data on who owns what properties, who's in fine, what your court records are. What do? So the hackers have told you, hey, Bitcoin, you got to pony up Bitcoin, $75,000, $100,000. And then you get it all back, and you don't have to worry about these millions of dollars a day in losses. But the FBI is telling you, don't do it, because if you give them $75,000, they're going to go up to 100 or 100. They're going to go to 150 to the next city. They're going to do every city in the country,
right?
Have us all on lockdown and hold. But you need to run your city, and you're hemorrhaging money. So what do? Come on, John, you got to go first.
So you want me to go first? Well, my role is what again?
You're running the city. You have to make decisions.
Right. The FBI, you call the FBI in, and the FBI is going to start an investigation on that. And then usually whatever losses that you incur would be federally insured. However, the reality of the situation is a lot of the people that work for the FBI are former people who have been caught doing the same thing. So I'm sure
in other words, they get the hackers
plan,
to try to track the hackers.
Right, that plan would unravel very quickly. I don't think that would...
I don't think the real-life evidence is in your favor, John.
Well,
I did come with some facts here. Yeah. Okay, what about you, Harry? Oops. Well, oh, you're on 3. I'm sorry, Harry. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. So I would pay. It's that simple, right? They're holding your information hostage. You pay, and then you hire a cyber hacker on your own to actually protect and go after these people.
And this is a question we get with hostage taking. This is a form of hostage taking.
I think that you got to err on the side of following the direction of the authorities. You know, because
this is a great debate. That's why I'm asking you both, because it's about immediate need versus the greater good. Now we see this when hostage taking occurs, or physical bodies, right? When some foreign government or terrorist group takes somebody, and the FBI often says, don't negotiate, because once you do it, other people are going to be taking.
Yeah,
but other people say, I want to save my kid's life or my father's life or my wife's life.
Right.
So this is happening in real time right now in cities across the country. It's happened for years, but now there's been a wave.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
Of cities being held for ransomware attacks. So Baltimore just paid $75,000 to hackers. We don't know where from. They could be Estonia, Russia, or they could be homegrown.
Right.
And they had $18 million of damage done, even with paying the $75,000 to try to repair their systems and lost receipts and business.
That's interesting.
It's happening. Atlanta got hit.
Yeah.
Riviera Beach, Florida agreed to pay. Now the money's gone up. So a couple months later, Riviera Beach, Florida, smaller community than ours, they paid hackers $600,000 to get their data back. Lake City, Florida, which is I think 11,000 people, they just paid $460,000. But guess what? Even though they got access back to their own records, they still lost 100 years worth of municipal documents that they had spent years uploading. Gone. Poof.
Right.
So the FBI is really worried about this. They're saying, and it's you're always paying Bitcoins, so it can't be traced, which I still can't believe that we can't trace this Bitcoin stuff. But in any case,
the Bitcoin is difficult. They started that back when I was actually in narcotics.
And the whole point is so you can't trace transactions.
Yeah, and the IP addresses, everything is scrambled, and the addresses you're sending to are so, they're so long, and it's impossible to.
But you talked about how
And they
federal
disappear within
investigators hire
15
the people.
seconds.
Oh, I see. Because they have server farms, which are somewhere, right, Harry? You're a tech guy. This stuff runs on massive server farms.
Right,
It's
Iceland, right? It's got a
international.
huge server farm.
So if the FBI is successful in luring people who used to be in the life, can they help them find that? I mean, why has it been so elusive? Why are maybe we don't hear about the cases where Interpol or the FBI find these people. Why is it proving so hard to stop these people from holding entire governments hostage? I mean, they shut down Estonia.
It's almost impossible because they have thousands of addresses, right? So, and then what you do is
And
they
millions,
force
probably.
you to transfer to one, and they transfer, and the transfers aren't being processed through a normal system.
Right. If you go through the Tor browser, you're talking 5, 6, 7 IP addresses.
But the money
done.
still has to be transferred somehow. In the end, people got to be getting the money they're stealing from. When you wire them $460,000,
Right. It goes.
you're
they
not.
end up with $460,000 in their pocket, right?
But you're not. This money is ghost money.
Right.
It's a
But in
totally
the
different
end, somebody
game.
buys a car or food or a house
Yeah.
with it, or drugs, right?
Yeah, but it's
It comes out of your bank account and goes to a ghost address
Yeah.
that disappears.
it's almost a house of cards, right? That could be brought down. Eventually, it will be brought down.
Right.
But
Like Silk Road. That was the biggest one. I remember Silk Road.
And they caught that guy.
They caught that guy eventually, but they caught that guy on almost.
That was a drug case, right?
Right. I don't want to say sheer luck, but that was old-fashioned style police where they caught him with his laptop lid open after surveilling him. They didn't catch him through going through the site and getting him as
So we don't know
administrator.
who or which group of who's
Right.
are conducting all these attacks on governments in America. It could well be Russian. It could
Yeah.
be North Korean.
I'd
it could be
I'd be interested
Baltimore.
to
It
see
could be
when
Augusta from Maine.
when law enforcement enters the fray here. If they're
They got to be entering the fray. I mean, this is the
right,
FBI.
but I
must
mean,
be.
are there? If when is Baltimore calling on the FBI to get some kind of intervention from the FBI, and are they listening throughout the whole thing? In other words, if you don't listen to the FBI, it's impossible for them to do their job and try and.
But as Harry
figure out
pointed
what's
out,
going
you
on.
have that immediate need. I think Harry was expressing what all the people around these cities
Yeah.
feel, which is that you have to keep government running.
Right.
We can't afford. I mean, New Haven. Can you imagine if we were losing $10 million a month or more?
No, right? Yeah, I get you.
I don't know.
and the thing is that don't get me wrong. I think that the federal government or the NSA they know more than they let on, right?
Right.
But they gotta have warrants for all of this information.
Right.
But they do sit there on the dark web.
But as John said, you got to let them do their job. So it's going to
Yeah.
make it easier for them to do their job.
Always, Congress has to change laws.
But wait a second. Before that, it's easier for them to do their job. I'm assuming, John, if you don't pay the ransom,
Right.
and you start
Let them see
recording
what's
further
going on, right.
transactions, although the people will know you're doing that, so they'll just leave it locked up. But what about that, Harry? I mean, because this is, as I said, this is an age-old question about terrorism. Do you negotiate with terrorists? Now, governments always boldly say we don't do it, and then they always do it.
See, well, that's the point, right? Because they tell you we don't negotiate with
But everyone
terrorists,
knows they do.
but they allow you to negotiate with the terrorists. So the federal government never does it directly,
But the terrorists still benefit
but
from
they
it.
know that, right? The
They
terrorists know
simply,
that.
it's not so much that they allow you to; it's that they simply can't stop you if that's what you want to do.
Yeah,
you
right.
know?
But
So-
in other words, there's a greater
Yes.
good and individual good here.
Right.
You've given us both poles of that. How do we resolve that so that people's interests can be protected, short of like stopping terrorism and this kind of ransomware, which I don't know if we're going to be able to.
You would think that they would have to, and I could tell you, and I don't know the federal system that well, but I do know that whenever they find something like this that they don't understand, they really do look to the people who
were
they
in the
take off
game.
and arrest.
So, John,
right?
what about, did you ever have cases of no, I'm not talking about tech holdups,
Right.
where people sort of ransomed you in some ways? And I mean, they kind of said, you have to negotiate with us and give us some money or,
No.
or something, or some kind of break.
No,
if you
not
want.
in our PD now. I've heard.
So
of
there's been no
cases-
hostage taking that you've ever dealt
No, no, nothing like that.
with, or that you were trained in when you were at the
We
FBI
were
Academy?
trained. We were trained in things like that. When you get certain courses like at especially at the DEA Academy, the Drug Unit Commanders Academy, you get a full battery of that. But it's
And what did you learn from that?
that was when I was first introduced to cryptocurrency, and it was a very big concern for them back then because it was nearly impossible to trace. So the problem is they try and trace it from the origin.
Was that 2012?
That was when I went there was 2010.
So now
believe.
imagine 9 years later, cryptocurrency is so much more sophisticated, as are the tools to try
Right.
to chase after it. John P. Stowe agrees with John. He writes in, Many of these cases are solved with human intelligence sources, confidential informants.
Right. It's unless you can, really figure out what they're doing. Like you go back to Silk Road, and I forget the guy's name, but he was administrating that unit. And he had that website, and he had that set up where, as soon as he closed his laptop, everything was disappeared. Right. So the only way the FBI came up to figure that out was they had to catch him on the site, logged in with the laptop open, and not let him get to it.
Right, but you have to have human intel
to know where
to
he
get
is.
to that point.
Exactly. Right.
And it is. This is what I mean. They're sitting on the dark web. A lot of them. A lot of these agencies.
Yeah, the IRS is huge. Is probably more involved in this than the FBI.
Well, Harry, you've had experience with dark web, right? I mean, in other words, you found ways to post things that people can't trace. No.
No comment.
But how does it work?
Well,
Just from what you've academically seen from afar, how does it work?
It's I can't say much about it, but it's something that you actually do know when there are government officials in a room.
Well, that's what they
with
did,
you, right? So
right.
It's like you get the feeling that, let's say there's a forum that people are exchanging political views on the dark web, right?
Right.
And
right, because there's a lot of political activity that doesn't get traced.
Oh, there's a lot of political activity. And let's say you're sitting in that room, there's about 30 of you, and 31 pops in, and he starts...
And the room is virtual, right? It's
yeah,
like a chat room.
Yeah, it's gone as soon as you're gone, right? So now, 31 comes in, and he's having the same conversation with you, but it's a different feel for the conversation. So you know that this guy is just there to
pull information
out of you. So you get that feeling a lot, not even on the dark web. You go to Facebook forums, and you're sitting there in a private group, and some people suddenly enter this private group,
right.
And the whole conversation changes to a conversation where somebody's actually trying to pull information from you. Right. So I mean, that's what I'm saying. They're sitting all over the web. It's not like the government doesn't have agents right. all over the web.
And that's what I was going to say. Is that's essentially how they solved Silk Road, was a bunch of IRS agents in a room simply monitoring IP addresses, and they caught one that raised their interest, and they followed it, and it led them through the Tor browser to Iceland, where the server farm that he was using was one of the biggest in the world, right?
And you were still on duty in New Haven during Silk Road, right?
Right.
So it was that massive using, I believe, digital currency to do
digital
transactions. Right. What did you learn from it locally? Were there implications? Were you getting briefed on it, even though it wasn't a New Haven case?
A lot of the violence that you don't see now is simply because a lot of these kids have learned how to take this stuff to the internet instead of dealing it hand to hand on the corners now. You'll do things on the internet, and then you'll simply meet quickly in a car, on a side street. So they've learned how. I'm not going to tell you it's as elaborate as Silk Road. That was. I mean,
well, you're talking about drug dealing
MIT
having
graduate.
moved to online, even above. So, like,
right.
I have a neighbor who said she noticed in my neighborhood at one corner at 4 a.m, she heard a prostitute working the corner on the phone where everyone could hear negotiating what the deal was going to be, and then a car pulls up, and then around the corner there's someone who parks a car, and somebody else comes up, they go in the back seat.
Very difficult to enforce.
Yeah.
However, so the upside to that, Paul, is that we're not going to make a ton of drug arrests, which if you're progressive enough, they don't do a whole lot anyway. So, but what is it doing? That it's driving crime down. So essentially, when you begin to enforce narcotics violations, drug violations, your goal is not necessarily to stop the drug use. It's to stop the violence associated with it. So it's kind of like a no harm, no foul thing now. It's almost accepted. Like, okay, this is what they're going to do. We don't see the crime and the violence. So, we're okay with that.
So then my neighbor is upset, but do you want to have that on your corner, though? Do you still want to have that on your corner?
No, of course not. I mean...
and it's prostitution now,
that's the thing.
too.
So when you suspect the crime, right?
Right.
And there's no hand-to-hand exchange of money, how are you allowed to go into somebody's phone?
You have to get a search warrant. And you have to
to get a search warrant. That takes...
Yeah, and the problem is that you have to show cause, and it's almost impossible to know that information.
Right, and let me tell you, everything is
there.
done I've been I've been making transactions myself with Bitcoin, right?
Why?
Because some people will only take Bitcoin.
And a lot of places that want you to send will give you a huge discount on whatever
Yeah.
you're buying. It's not necessarily anything
So what do you
illegal.
buy with Bitcoin?
You buy anything. with
There's
Bitcoin.
different things you buy. You could buy different there's bartering that you do online now also, that it's a totally different thing where you're gonna do a certain function for somebody, but also
So services.
right for services, and the Bitcoin is the major attraction, right? Because nobody, and this is the reason they're taking it, because they don't have to file with the IRS.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So that money sits there and it's
And that's
collected.
why John says IRS might be the agency.
the-
Yeah,
most
the
concerned.
IRS
do it.
is much more heavily involved in a lot of that cryptocurrency stuff than the FBI would be. The FBI gets involved in it, obviously.
And we're involved in talking about law enforcement, criminal justice here on WNHH's AFM's Dateline New Haven. We're with John Velleca and Harry Drost at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenpen.org. Okay, now I'm going to put you in another case, okay? Now I'm going to pretend you're running a law enforcement agency, and there's a decision they're all facing. And they're saying, look at all these cameras we have up now. We have cameras everywhere. Like in New Haven recently, we had all this information on shootings that happened right after they happened in Havel, because some people have their own cameras, and they share that with the police. And we have shot spotters, so we now know instantly when shots get fired in so many parts of the city. This has gone to another level. So in Detroit, they're using facial recognition, the police, just in public squares, keeping track of who's going where. And some people are very upset about that. They said, we love using cameras to try to stop crime. But then they're saying we don't want the cameras to completely work, because if they completely work, you can easily identify people on there, which is the point.
Right.
But the problem is that not only do people worry about being spied on in public, but if you're black, there's so many mistakes. So like in Detroit, they're doing it widespread, and I think a third of the time, black men got identified as women, or vice versa. And that they so often get the black people's faces wrong that then they can go after you to try to arrest you for some horrible crime. But you have nothing to do with that person. Just you had the same skin color and the computer went batty. So there's a lot of great questions here. Detroit's trying to figure out. New Haven's going to have to figure this out.
Yeah.
Because how much surveillance do we want? The genie's out of the bottle. There's not much privacy anywhere anymore. Are we going to put any limits on it? So one question is, if it works right, do we want it? And the other question is, what about when it doesn't work right?
Well, here's the problem.
Where do we draw the line?
Let's say you use facial recognition. You got the wrong guy, but you catch him in a crime. Does that evidence get thrown out because you?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah,
That's the whole thing. So it's like, it's insane. I read an article where more than 50%, of black people get.
Right. Now,
They
what
get
if
it
they
wrong.
could? What if they could make it work right? Because in China, they're using it to
Yeah.
basically imprison a whole province of 1 million Uyghurs. If I'm saying that right, Muslim, they want to wipe out their culture, and they have them go through checkpoints and use the
Retraining.
facial recognition to make sure they're not praying, believe it or not.
Yeah,
and
they're
then
retraining them.
We're not retraining, send re-education camp, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah.
So, but what's going to happen in our cities? Because don't we want to have technology? I mean, don't you think that's part of the reason, John and Harry, that crime overall is down over time in New Haven, among many other reasons?
I think it's
the
got
investigations, community policing, but also technology.
Yeah, I think it's got something to do with. I mean, when you start to talk about what the experts say, there's probably 11 or 12 different factors that they're talking about. That happens to be one of them, technology. But like I said,
how
during
good do we want technology to be? Like, if we could have no crime, are we willing to pay the price that we have no privacy?
Well, like I said during that, during the forum when the four of us were there, I'm in favor of less policing at this point, not more. That's my personal opinion. I think we over-police the public.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
what
not.
about technology? We got cameras like that
I think
officer
that
involved shooting in Hamden.
Right. I think
the only reason we know what really happened is because of all the camera footage.
Right. Understood. And to use it, to use a camera that's in place innocently enough for security, and something happens to happen and we get to see it. It's much different than specifically posting up facial recognition cameras or flying drones over people's houses. I think that has to be balanced against people's civil rights.
And of course, and you're right. Now that is, and I know, Harry, you feel strongly about this, with the dirt biking in New Haven, which people are getting run over, getting hit. It's really dangerous.
Right.
People feel there's no alternative. to having drones flying and taking pictures of this stuff.
Yeah, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the drone. I think the drones are useful in tactical operations to get the layout and things like that of the house. I don't think drones. My personal
Meaning, if
opinion,
someone's holed up and you don't want to have them get shot,
Right.
send a drone to
I
see
don't.
where
I
they're
don't
at.
want to get. I don't think that the police are doing a service for the community by implementing all this high tech equipment and essentially monitoring you at every.
And I'm just
turn
playing
of your
devil's
life.
advocate. I'm not really agreeing or disagreeing with you,
Right.
John. But what about, like, people prey on people? Someone once shot in a house and got an 8-year-old shot the other week. And we got
Understood.
surveillance that got us some clues, but wouldn't we love if the camera could just tell us who that person was and
Right.
just
I
go
mean,
arrest them?
and you'd have to balance that against all the times we use that, and it's not. You know,
and John P.
in
Stowe
a
writes in the
situation.
problem with facial recognition is the technology is simply not there yet.
Yeah.
We all agree about that. So
True.
I mean, what happens when it is there?
Well, yeah, right, and that's what it is. What does happen? Do you?
Or
want,
maybe for
I
now
don't want
we'll
somebody
just-
watching me everywhere I go.
Well, you're
no matter
white,
what.
so it kind of works for you. So maybe we could just surveil white people for now until they fix the bugs.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, Harry, what's your take on all this?
Well, eventually, Big Brother's going to be the great equalizer, right?
Unless we stop it.
Unless we stop it.
Unless we stop.
And it's
But-
impossible
but
to
I-
stop it because
but it's-
private
right.
companies are going to watch us
The,
eat
the
anyway.
train is rolling at a high speed right now, and it's almost
but
impossible to
is
stop.
that where we want to go with everything? With
But that's
everything
going to
that
be
you can do on the internet. We just got done talking about how anonymous you can be. Do you want? Is that the kind of world we want? And if we're going to keep fostering that, that is where we're going to go. And there's going to be no life for anybody.
And
to
aren't we
have.
there anyway? Because you talked about the capacity of the people who are evading, the hackers who are evading public authorities and trying to track down these crimes. Private interests will be able to watch us, probably
Well,
are,
that-
and use that facial recognition.
that's going to be the key,
technology.
right? So
Right.
you're going to have, like around the green, the main areas, you're going to have cameras all over the place. But then you're going to rely on private owners to have these cameras that are going to be accessible to the police
Right.
at all times.
Yeah, I mean, I like to have a more utopian thought on crime, and let's not think about what we should do after a crime occurs. Let's try to address why the crime is occurring to begin with, and maybe we won't need these cameras and drones and everything else if we could figure out why people are doing what they're doing and maybe try and correct that. I mean,
That bleeding heart of yours. John.
well, I mean, it makes more sense to me. I mean,
yeah,
it's-
but
it simply
you're not
makes
going
more
to
sense.
eliminate.
You're not going to eliminate crime. You're
Crime, I mean,
100% right.
you
So
think
why?
people-
So why take everything from everyone?
If you make people feel better, they're going to stop being.
No, I think
criminals.
that in other words, we have cameras out there, and it's great that we catch some guy shooting into a house that hits an 8-year-old. That is great. Well, why not figure out, attack the gun violence and why somebody feels the need to resort to taking a gun and firing at the house to begin with?
Kumbaya.
Right, but if the criminal knows that there are cameras on every corner, he's not going to commit the
I
crime.
don't
But
believe.
there
I don't.
are.
I don't
There are
believe
cameras
that.
in every
I
corner
don't.
now.
They
Well,
do
that's-
whatever they want. They mask
well, that's-
themselves up and go
that's
head to
gonna
toe, and there you
be-
go.
That's going to be the monsters who continue to do
Right.
crimes. But the person who's just looking to get away with it, who's not a monster.
Right. So in the interim, that we rob the rest of society of their privacy and their civil rights to protect ourselves against the small group of people who are committing crime.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying. I
we-
mean,
we-
I don't know the answer.
we
to it.
laughed when 1984 came out, right?
Right, and a lot of it's here. What about red light cameras? New Haven, for a decade, I think, has been trying to get the state give it permission to put cameras, red lights to show people speeding. It's not facial
Yeah, that's a
recognition.
bunch of
And
nonsense.
then it gets their license plate if they're speeding. It hasn't been shown necessarily to work out the way people want. In places where they've done it, there's civil liberties concerns.
Right,
But
because
other
they use
people
it
say
for other
the driving
things.
is right. But what about if they used it just for that?
They're not using it just for that, Paul. There's no way, as the chief of police, I would spend all that money for cameras just to catch somebody going through a red light. Don't let anybody BS you. The back in their mind, they're going to use it for a crime camera, essentially.
And I don't even think
We just
that
happened to watch a car go through a light, and go figure. We
Right.
saw these guys on the corner selling drugs. Go figure.
But I don't even think
Now
they're
what do
being
we do?
used
We
for
got to
that.
use it.
Running red lights, right?
Well, it's supposed to. The way the system's supposed to work is if when the light turns red, the camera's
That-
engaged.
it
Anything
takes
that
a
goes through,
snapshot,
they take a
right?
snapshot. Right. The problem is that when one side is red, the other side is green, the other side is red. So there's a camera engaged at all times. Right.
And people have claimed in lawsuits in other communities that the camera's wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
Not only are the cameras wrong,
that's-
in New Haven, the lights are all wrong. So you have a long yellow over here, a short yellow over there.
Sometimes you look and it's both green. They're both red. What the
It's
hell's going
insane.
on, you know?
Actually,
New
Pat
Haven
Dillon,
is
state
ridiculous.
rep, when people brought this up at a meeting I was at recently about the cameras, she said she'd be more interested in having New Haven get rid of all those no turn on red signs because in our city in the 70s when we had the turn on red legislation, either early 80s or mid 70s, John Cavallaro was the head of traffic and parking, didn't like the change. So pretty much at almost every place you could turn right on red, even if it doesn't get much traffic, you put a sign up. I don't know why, but she feels that that contributes more to bad driving and dangerous driving rather than just letting people go through. I'm not sure.
Not dangerous, but I would get rid of them too because I like to turn on red.
Well, I like to remind people that are listening
I
to
just-
Dateline New Haven on WNHHFM 103.5. Joel LaChance checked in. Thanks for listening, Joel. Thanks for the comments, John P. Stowe. So who counts when they're missing? This is kind of obvious, right? So for every day for a month, we've been reading stories about a missing woman who was wealthy from New Canaan, Jennifer Doulos.
Right.
We every day have missing cases in New Haven where we're not reading about it. Why is that? When you were the cop, John, why was that? When did you get pressure for which kind of people missing? Like Annie Lay, when she was missing for 3 days, the Yale grad student who ended up being murdered. You know, the whole national press corps was here covering it, and every 10 minutes of developments would get reported sometimes. But what about all these other cases? Sometimes it is just teenagers who like
disappear for the day, sure. But there are, you know, I could name a few. There's people have been missing for a long time, and we haven't, you know, brought out all the equipment and the cameras and everything else.
And it's just obvious if you're rich and you're
and
or,
if you
or famous,
can,
then we care. Otherwise, we don't
right.
care.
If you're somebody whose voice is heard, and then you're, you know, somebody can make it heard to the police, then that's what we're going to say.
I mean, the reason I asked is because I'm in New Haven. They've did a campaign because of this Doulos case to remind people about Evelyn Frisco and Lisa Ann Calvo, two prostitutes in Fairhaven.
Those are the people
over
I
the
was
last
actually
15 years in Fairhaven have been missing. We believe murdered.
Mm-hmm.
They did. I remember that before
we
you
did press conferences and we did a lot of stuff.
A couple of years ago, they reopened the case. They dug up a car yard in the hill.
Yeah.
An auto graveyard too. I mean, a repair place for.
And Jerry Dolphin, here's another one.
Yeah, and they dug up trying to find her, and then again, I guess I wonder whether they're just overdoing the Doulos case. I mean,
you just said it. I mean, it's getting a lot of attention, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, I don't think anybody can debate that now.
Yeah,
you know.
Okay, I want to bring you guys back to when you talk about technology is one of maybe 8 or 12 reasons crime is so down. We had stats for the first 6 months or through June 23rd. That showed that we had 5 reported homicides, whereas there were 7 years ago, a year ago during that same period. But our non-fatal shootings went up from 23 to 34. And reported shots fired went up from 47 to 72 incidents. What do we take from that? Does that matter?
Oh, yeah. They matter more than the homicides, 100% more.
Right, homicides could just be 1 or 2, throws the whole numbers off.
It's essentially shot placement. What's to say, you know.
Did they hit?
Yeah, it depends on where people are hit.
So what
how
about
close
these
they are to the
blips?
hospital.
Over years, there's no question our violence is down in general to records the lowest of decades. But what about when they go up for that blip? How important a blip is that? How significant? What's that saying about crime in our city?
The crime is going to rise, of course. That's what that is. I mean, a lot of you have to remember though too in our city, a lot of the, you know, you get one shooting and you might get 7 or 8 shootings on the back
related
end of that.
to it, and that's sort of what happens. So if it's going to go up 2, it's really going to go up 12.
Yeah, you can rest assured, especially if you have a homicide. You might end up with 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 non-fatals trying to retaliate.
And John P. Stowe says non-fatal because medicine is better.
What's that?
Medicine is better. That's why he says they're non-fatal.
That's true.
But you're saying that when we look at
we have
statistics,
2 of the best trauma centers, you know, around.
Yale and where else?
St. Ray's. Well, they were trauma. I think they were trauma too. But they'll take you in, and they have enough. You know, they have enough experience.
But when you're saying that if it went up, if we have 12 more non-fatal shootings over almost 6 months from a year ago, you're saying that's really, and actually I'm kind of hearing that from these cases.
Yeah.
You're really talking about a couple of shootings that then have people shooting in retaliation.
Well, here's how this usually goes, and this is how it's been going for years. So even though I've been gone for a while, I could speak on it. Is that if you have somebody hypothetically in the hill who gets shot, and the people on the street find out that this is somebody from New Hallville. Now, there's going to be friends of the victim who pick up and go looking for the actual shooter, but there's also going to be people who just simply live in the hill going after people in New Hallville arbitrarily. Have nothing to do with the victim or the perpetrator, but now it's a neighborhood against neighborhood thing. And you may end up with, you know, however many non-fatal shootings, and then the eventual homicide that's the retaliatory homicide. And then that always seems to spur things to happen in other areas.
So I've seen
as
the
well.
intelligence unit here in New Haven working with the feds and state. They identified the people they think were involved in these shootings this first half of the year. They went out looking for them. So in one case, they arrested a guy. They went to look at a guy who then was shooting when they looked at him.
Yeah.
And then they caught him. The next day, they went to the house of someone they thought had been involved in an earlier shooting. They arrested him after he holed himself up in the house. Luckily, no one got hurt.
Right.
Then someone else got shot, I think killed. And they said that that person had been involved in this back and forth.
Yeah.
How does it end? Are they doing the right thing? Would we have seen more shootings if our intelligence unit wasn't on it?
Maybe very difficult to stop a shooting, to be quite honest with you. But I believe that
like in one case, they had a guy who had a different warrant out for him. Right. They had actually been let him out. He was arrested for gun-related offense, and he made bail. But then the Fed said, "Hey, we have this other warrant we can get him on."
Yeah, I think
so. They arrested him before they felt he would have.
I think that this intelligence unit is very competent. To be honest with you, I think they're very good at what they do, and I think that they may not be able to prove the shooting, but if they develop a suspect, then they can go and do what you're talking about and just figure out a way to get this person out of the community before they do.
So
another
one thinking
shooting.
there, and there's no question, is what they need to do. Look at who just got shot to think who would shoot next and pull them off. John P. Stowe says this goes back to John's point. You have to figure out why these shootings are happening, why retaliation happens. Can the police department solve that?
Sure, absolutely.
The root causes of crime and retaliation?
We used to have, and they still do. I mean, and this is going back 7 years, so I'm sure it's evolved now. We had software that would pin drop everybody, who got shot, who did a shooting, everybody, within arm's length, 2 or 3 or 4 degrees of separation. That people,
social networks.
Right, and then you would start to see, that group of people.
But I think what he's talking about was your point about drugs and other crimes were the root social causes for this behavior.
Right, and a lot of it in New Haven has to do with neighborhood on neighborhood violence. That's been here since for years, for a long, long time.
And it's not always drugs.
Not always drugs, not at all, no.
Insults on Facebook.
I mean, we've had, God.
So is the answer to John's point and your point jobs for people, or is it like not growing up in homes?
No, I mean,
where
this is something I brought up, to Mayor DeStefano when we were there. I think that the introduction of conflict resolution at a very young age, instead of most schools will bring that in the high school level. I thought it was smarter to bring them in at the junior high level and start to deal, because a lot of the kids are not dealing with the parental unit that helps them deal with conflict.
In other words, the parents aren't around,
right?
Or if they're around, they're not helping them.
So
with
if they learn how to handle those emotions and learn how to handle what's going on in their life, they may be less apt.
So that's the root cause. At a young age, learn how to settle something without fighting.
I think a lot of our kids in our city here, they see their problems being handled in violent ways, and they think that that's the way you handle a problem.
Harry, what were you saying?
I got a great solution, right?
Lock them all up. Trump.
It's probably going to solve everything, right? What you do is you create more laws to go after the guns of law-abiding citizens.
There we go.
Right? And this way, maybe the criminals will start following the laws. Oh, wait a minute. They're criminals. They don't follow the laws.
Oh, speaking of law-abiding officers or not.
Well, let's take all law-abiding citizens'
We're
guns
expecting
away.
very soon.
I didn't say anything about gun control.
We're expecting very soon a
That's how you solve it.
resolution to the officer-involved shooting that happened in New Hallville when a Yale cop and a Hampton cop who crossed state lines shot up a car and hit up someone inside on our person at 4 in the morning. What's your guess on how that's going to turn out?
I would think that the officer is going to face some kind of charge.
Criminal, the car and the officer. What about the Yale officer also?
I don't believe
the
Yale officer. No.
But I think we're going to see the Yale officer leave the force because he did a lot of things wrong. He didn't turn on his body camera. He didn't radio in where he was.
Right. That's an issue that's becoming more prevalent. That you're chief now. That's something you really have to get on top of.
Which is,
it just looks terrible
when people don't turn on their body camera.
Right,
but they have to be careful not to in certain cases like domestic violence.
Why isn't it always on?
Because
I don't understand that.
You don't. First of all, it's a lot to monitor. Second of all, you have certain private interactions, like a woman's reporting domestic violence. You don't want that on.
Well, can you have it on, and then ask the person, is it okay to have this portion of the video?
You can. Yeah.
Because it should be monitoring.
So he's saying
everything.
default. Harry's saying the default should be they're on 24/7. Is there a technical?
No, there's a problem. The batteries would not.
No, as soon as you get out your car,
right,
to confront a situation,
it's supposed to go on. As soon as you have an interaction, right? Yeah. And most guys will do that, and it'll go back 30 seconds. It just goes back 30 seconds without the sound, but you can see it. In that regard, it's tough to say because one part of me says, listen, there's no reason for you not to have that on because you know what you're going after. You see you're stopping a car, you should. But then again, I don't know how quickly that gunfire erupted. It's almost tough to say the kid is under gunfire, wait a minute, let me stop and turn my body camera on. So I don't really know. I know he did take some shrapnel to him, so him returning fire seems to be fine. You know what I mean? That's just the basics of the
Well, one question always
investigation.
there is we always sympathize with cops who once the shooting starts, they fire a lot because they might not know where it's coming from, and they often hit other cops. But some people say, do we really want them just to fire endlessly, or can there be some?
There's nothing there's something that's called sympathetic fire, which means that when one officer starts firing, everybody starts to fire and everybody unloads.
47 shots with Diallo, that kind of thing.
Right, but
it's
it's not in training. It doesn't go that way.
How does it go in training?
We shoot and then you scan to see if your target is hit and to see if there are additional targets, and then you're supposed to holster
Which gets
and render
harder
aid.
the more people who are firing, right? Because the bullets are still coming.
No, I think it's a human thing, to be honest with you. We had the shooting downtown not too long ago, in what was it, in 2011, when the female officers unloaded, 16 times. And when we interviewed her, she thought she saw 2 or 3 times. Some of them, I think, just get so frightened with what's going on. They just...
So it's not true. It used to be held as a given that once they start firing, it's not relevant that they fired a lot because they're trying to prevail.
I don't know about
but
that.
You're not prevailing if you're firing a lot. You're creating more danger.
No, I listen, I've investigated a lot of in officer-involved shootings, and I never thought for a second that it wasn't relevant how many times you shot.
Harry, do you have a guess on what's going to happen?
I don't, but you look at that video, it looked like he was doing cover fire.
Yeah, he was just reckless. He really didn't really have
the
any
Hampton
control.
officer, what was
and then to run up on the passenger side.
That's the part I still don't get. Why did he run up to the passenger side
and just essentially unload into the car? I'll tell you this: I don't know what State's Attorney Griffin is thinking, and I don't know the insides of the investigation. But you would have to think that would fit reckless endangerment. To me,
Right.
My personal opinion. I'm not going to tell you it's an assault.
And then cops say, now we can't do our jobs because we're going to be.
It's a bunch of nonsense when they start complaining like that. I don't even entertain it. They can do their job just fine.
Yeah, and you look at that has nothing to do with training, because he wasn't trained to do that.
Right.
That's something that guy shouldn't be a cop. He just shouldn't be a cop.
All right.
I mean,
both of them I think are not going to be cops, but I think only one's going to be criminally charged. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and we're talking about that on WNHH's Dateline New Haven. Before we go, I want to ask you folks if you have any advice for the Civilian Review Board. They've now named people who have to just be approved, so it's going to get started. John, you had thought they should have just empowered the police commission with subpoena to have a subcommittee since they already have subpoena power. Any advice to the people now who have been picked? Some of whom have law enforcement backgrounds, some have backgrounds protesting law enforcement. Yeah. What's going to make this succeed or not succeed?
I mean, their ability to be objective, to be honest with you. And they're going to have to. There's a lot of education that's going to have to go around with you being on this board. Now, it's not as easy as you believe policing so you can critique it. They're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring out what it is the police do and the policies and what's right and what's wrong.
Any thoughts, Harry?
Like John said, be objective, but these days that's rare.
My advice is show up.
Yeah.
Last time no one came to the meetings, they never
right?
had a quorum. Sit through all these long, boring meetings if you want to be on there, and then figure out how truth is sometimes in the gray areas. Thanks for plumbing those gray areas today. There'll be a camera on your way out today, folks, taking your facial recognition view so we can see who you really are and if you've committed any crimes in the last 2 years.
Pull my hat down.
I want to thank John Velleca and the always amazing Harry Jarvis and Sam Hadelman behind the scenes, making it all work on social media here on Dateline New Haven. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. And John Stowe, thanks for your comments. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.